one of the things I got very interested in, along with some peers, was painting murals. Michael Fagins, Michael Jones, Hank Risen, and a number of us got really intrigued with a group, mural painting group in Los Angeles called the LA Fine Arts Squad. They'd done beautiful work, and we wanted to try it ourselves. The problem was none of us had ever painted a mural before, and we had no idea how to go about it. But we decided we were going to go ahead, and we decided what we would do is try to make a building disappear by painting what was behind it. Now, that turns out to be graphically a little more complicated. You can't just go to the other side of the building and use a wide-angle lens and take a photograph, because everything's going to be distorted. So we had to use a surveying instrument to kind of get all these verticals, and we had to sort of fake the horizontals. But what we did was a 30 by 40 inch painting on mat board of this, which corresponded to the 30 by 40 foot wall. And then we drew, every 1 inch, we drew a grid line across the whole surface, and we cut it up into 4 by 4 inch squares. Now, the other problem we had was we were convinced that if we went to the administration and said we want to paint this mural on the side of one of the school buildings, they would say, well, look, you guys are going to have to get the money to pay union painters. You can't do that. So we decided not to ask them. That's right. So we mixed up all of our paint, and we rented the scaffolding, and at 5 o'clock, when everybody went home, we showed up at the building, and we set up all this scaffolding. And by nightfall that night, we had the background blue color painted, we had the chalk line snapped, and the next morning, everybody climbed up in the scaffolding. You see, you would be given a card this big, equivalent to the 4 by 4 foot square on the wall, and you had to go up there and sketch in what you had on the card, and then climb back down and get the right paint color and paint it in. So we worked like nailers. We had, at that point, we had about 15 or 20 people involved in this, and by Sunday morning, it was really coming together. We were putting finishing touches on it. I'll never forget, the cars were stopping on Senior Avenue, people were crowding around, and the provost, I'm pretty sure it was the provost, walked up, and his jaw was hanging down, and I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry we didn't ask, but we were so afraid you were going to say no. And he said, no, this is fantastic. This is great. When did you guys do this? So at that point, we were off and running, and we then decided to do, a lot of us were into videotape. We decided to do some videotaping inside a local coffee shop, and then we painted that on the outside of the building. This was difficult because you were painting individual video lines, kind of, but if you stepped way back and squinted your eyes, in fact, even now, if you squint your eyes, you can see the previous image of the coffee cup in the hand. We discovered about this time that instead of doing this grid thing, if you had a negative 35 millimeter slide that was resolved into black and white, no grays, you could project that thing on the wall of a barn at night, climb up in the scaffolding, and everywhere you saw white, if you painted black, then the next morning you'd have the image pretty well up. You could do final touch-ups. So at that point, we started painting things all over the place. These are a couple of appropriated Richard Avedon photographs. And it's amazing. This is 68, 70, 71. People were calling the police department saying, what are those faces doing on the barn? And we realized that, how much of visual imagery carries written messages with it. And if you don't have a written message, people start to conjure up all sorts of things in their heads about what it means. We painted an airplane landing right near Wright-Patterson. At one point, somebody said, let's apply for a National Endowment for the Arts grant. Somebody else in the group said, well, we're not going to get an NEA grant. You've got to be Jasper Johns or somebody famous to get an NEA grant. And we thought, well, let's try it. And all of a sudden, we got it. But the problem was they gave us a grant for $7,500, but it had to be matched with $7,500 from a local arts organization. So we were up a creek. And so what we did is we went downtown and we cleaned out all our savings accounts and put them all together, bought a cashier's check payable to Public Works, Xeroxed it, sent the Xerox to NEA. They said, that looks great, here's your check. we took our money back and we were off and running. These are the kinds of skills you learn at Antioch. Right? The next one, the next grant, we got some money from NEA, but because we proposed to paint murals on the sides of semi-truck trailers. And it turned out it was going to be my job, because I had other commitments, my job to go to Chicago to try to find a trucking company to let us paint on 10 of their trucks images that we chose, and to also pay us $1,500 per truck, because we needed the money to match the NEA grant this time around. So off I went, and I got out the yellow page. I stayed in a friend's apartment in Chicago. I got the yellow pages out. I started calling trucking companies. I explained everything, and then this person on the other line, the line would get silent, and then somebody would say, I don't think we're interested, thanks for calling, click, And all of a sudden, this wonderful receptionist, she said, I don't know, I don't think we'd be interested in this, but you should call the Jerry Smithers Show on WLS. He takes all kinds of weird requests. So I called WLS, and I get this front person, and I explain things, and he says, hang on just a second, this sounds pretty good. And the next thing I know, this voice goes, yo, this is Jerry Smithers, who am I talking to? And I thought, holy smokes, I am talking to all of Chicagoland, So I just blurted out the whole story, making the building disappear, and painting on barns around, and ended up with, so we're looking for a trucking company to collaborate with us, and he said, well, that sounds pretty good. Good luck. Hung up the phone, and I was sitting there in this empty room, and I was thinking, gosh, that was wild. 15 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was the head of a trucking company. He said, I like this idea. I want you to come by and visit me. He gave us 10 of these trucks with brand new fiberglass surface sides, a bay, a driver, a tractor, and we really went to town. This was one of our favorites. It was, believe it or not, it was a postcard. And the caption, you flipped it over, and the caption on the postcard said, Ohio State Turnpike. And we thought this was a piece of work, we got to put this on the side of a truck. I want to tell you something else about this group. We called ourselves Public Works. This is a really bad image. It's the only thing I could get of the 1973 strike. For those of you who were here, it was a demoralizing time. The buildings were chained shut. If you called the university, you got a voice saying, Antioch College liberated switchboard. And we couldn't get into the art building. It was just really not a good time for all involved. And it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. It was February, Valentine's Day was coming, and we decided, the Public Works group, that we were going to have to do an event. And we decided we were going to give a Valentine to Antioch. And we made a 8-foot stuffed red heart, and I had some rope on both sides of it, painted gold. And the problem was, we were going to hang this thing on the front of main building. And the problem was, how were we going to get around the guards on the building? So we showed up at 3 in the morning with our ladder and our heart, and the ladder was banging around. All of a sudden, these guards come running around and say, what are you guys doing out here? And we said, well, we're going to hang this heart on main building. We got permission from Central Committee. They go, you got permission from Central Committee? We go, yeah. They go, all right, go ahead. We hung up our heart, but we also had 1,000 plain red hearts printed on a piece of white paper, no other message. And we put those things under everybody's dorm room and on as many houses downtown as we could get to. And that morning, everybody woke up and got a Valentine. They had no idea who it was from. And we were really proud of ourselves. That was a great thing, and it was badly needed at the moment. I went on, I left Antioch, went to work with Kathy and Howie Clark at Twin Rocker Handmade Paper in Brookston, Indiana. I was still painting some murals. These are my mural painting pants. We were making handmade paper used in fine art printmaking, watercolor paper. The biggest paper we made was 3 by 4 foot. Catherine, Kitty, and I, the two first apprentices, were actually paying Kathy and Howie $10 a week for food because the business had no money. We were all just really interested in paper making. While I was there, I started to realize that everybody involved in paper making in America at the time had no traditional training in this, no technical background. Everybody was just trying to reinvent the craft from books. And I got very interested in the possibility of going to Japan to study with people who had grown up in that tradition. When I was a Cranbrook School student, I had a piece of Japanese paper stuck in my checkbook because I was intrigued with its warmth, its character, the kind of aesthetic properties it had. But I never dreamed at the time I'd be able to go to Japan and work with the people who made it. And I didn't really, I was just beginning to think it might possibly be something I could do when I was a Twin Rocker, but I really wanted to get this exposure to people with traditional background. Long story made quite short. I got a Fulbright and a renewal, spent 2 years in Japan, had to cut off all my long hair and beard because I was told that would not be, actually what happened was I got the Fulbright Award. I bought a plane ticket with a stop in Berkeley and studied Japanese intensively for a summer because I didn't have much Japanese. My classmates were going, why do you study so hard? And I said, because I'm terrified. I'm on my way to Japan and I can't speak the language. And while I was there, I was rooming with a bunch of Japanese guys who were studying English, and they couldn't speak English very well, but eventually it turned out that I was on my way to Japan, and half of them said the beard was a problem, the other half said the long hair was a problem, so this is what I looked like when I hit Japan. But I traveled all over the country. It was an amazing thing to me to be able to do exactly what I wanted to do, day after day, go on a trip, shoot as much live film as I wanted to, buy books when I needed to using this Fulbright money, and I'd come back to Tokyo and someone would have put more money in my bank account. To not have to worry about paying the rent, to be able to put blinders on and pursue this was just fantastic. And I would lay awake in bed some nights thinking, I'm seeing stuff, I'm learning stuff that nobody from the West has ever figured out before. And it was really an incredible time. I enjoyed every minute of it. All the while, I was intrigued with this character that I mentioned earlier in Handmade Papers, but I didn't quite know where it came from. And eventually I was convinced that it had to do with traditional techniques used earlier, many of which were going out of use. And I didn't quite know what I was going to do with that, but Eiichiro Abe, a National Living Treasure papermaker, and particularly his apprentice, Katsu Tadahiko. Katsu took a real interest in me and kind of took me under the wing. And at one point, I asked him about this. I said, these papers that really look and feel great, that are really long-lasting, they're made with these old techniques. And he said, Barrett, you're right about that, but you've got to realize that that kind of economic world is gone. That kind of paper is not going to be made as a commodity the way it used to be ever again. But that's why you and I and other young people have to learn these techniques before they disappear, because if we don't, they're going to be gone and it's going to be our fault. And the idea that I had some kind of role to play in this whole story, be the interface between the history and the future of the craft, was something that had never occurred to me. And I think this probably happens to a lot of people, but to kids in a lot of professions, when they realize, you know, the buck stops with me. I could make a change in this field. I can really make a contribution.